Dr. Kirk Parsley, known as Doc Parsley, is a distinguished expert in sleep optimization, health, and human performance. His journey began at only 19 years old as a Navy SEAL. Recognizing performance declines due to sleep deprivation in the SEALs, Doc Parsley developed a natural solution using tailored nutrients that significantly improved their rest, recovery, and overall performance. His success led him to becoming a leading medical expert for the US Special Forces, a role he continued even after his military service. Today, he's a sought after human performance consultant, empowering top athletes, entrepreneurs, corporations, and executives to reach their full potential with unwavering passion. Dr. Parsley, it is so good having you at your VitaFest. I have been such a fan of your work for the longest time. As I mentioned, Doctors Mike and Mary Dan Eads had told me about you about 10 years ago. And so finally getting in contact with you has been such a gift to me. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm still messing with this angle there. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to do a different intro anyway, so don't worry about that. Are you happy? No.
Yeah, I just have to make sure I'm not giving away like patient information on my board behind. So it looks fine. Okay.
I can't
We're good.
see any right, but okay, let's do it. Okay,
Ready.
so sleep is often overlooked in discussions about health and performance. Why is sleep so crucial for our overall well-being and cognitive functioning?
Okay. Well, the the not so popular but true answer is that sleep is really the most important thing for all performance. So um, when you learn new information that you want to implement and say like you want to be a better communicator and you take courses or you work with a coach or you read books or whatever you do and you want to be better at communication. Well, you're being exposed to new information and that's going into your short-term memory. It's not going into your long-term memory until you go to sleep. When you go to sleep at night, when you're in REM sleep, you're going to prune off, like your neurons are going to have like little buds, like think of like a bush in the a tree or bush in the spring, forming little buds that are going to turn into flowers. You'll actually prune off stuff that you deem to be useless or not important after you've rehearsed everything a couple of times. And then anything that you think is useful, you're going to reinforce that and you're going to connect that to other pieces of information that you already know. And then once you can connect new information to old information and you can think of it now from different angles, now you actually know that and you can actually implement it. If you want to get stronger and you work out, you'll lift weights. Say you want to be able to lift more weights. So you lift weights, you lift as much weight as you possibly can, sort of as quickly as you can. You completely exhaust your fibers, you damage your muscle fibers, and you come out of the gym a little weaker. When you go to sleep at night, you go into deep sleep, and during deep sleep, that's when you're anabolic. That's when all your anabolic hormones are secreted. That's when your stress hormones are the lowest. And you will actually repair that muscle fiber to be thicker and stronger. You'll repair the damage that you did. And then, just based on what you've done that day, your body systems will know, well, in order to protect us as being all of the cells of the body, this community of cells we call Kirk, all of my cells are going to, in unison, work towards making that muscle fiber thicker and stronger so that tomorrow I can lift that weight and not damage my body. And so that's how I'll get progressively stronger over time, just repairing from a little bit of damage each day and getting slightly stronger. That's a very simplified version of it. Physical training takes multiple days to recover and all that stuff, but that's the basic gist of it. So when you're talking about performance, it doesn't matter if it's cognitive, emotional, psychological, physical endurance, physical strength, reaction time, coordination, muscle memory of playing an instrument, assimilating new information, whatever. Everything that you do is going to actually be solidified while you're asleep. And so if you aren't getting enough sleep, you're purposefully getting rid of the most important part of your progress plan, right? You have a plan that I'm going to do X amount of work with the anticipation of reaching a certain level of performance in a certain time frame. And you're purposefully, if you sleep 6 hours instead of 8, you're purposefully choosing to do that 25% slower.
That's incredible. Okay, I want to touch on this concept of people think that, you sleep badly one night, you sleep 4 hours, you can catch it up the next night. Is there truth in that? Like when we lose sleep, what happens?
So when we're awake, we're actually what we call catabolic. So uh, catabolic, we take big complex things and we make small simple things out of them. So as an example, if I'm in calorie restriction, I'm starving, all of my cells in my body need amino acids, and if I'm not eating any protein to give my body amino acids, my body will use my muscles as a source of
Yeah.
amino acids. So it will break down my muscles and form amino acids and distribute it across my body so all my cells can stay alive and do their jobs. Anabolics the opposite. I eat a bunch of protein and my body breaks it down into amino acids, and when I exercise or do whatever intensely, I damage tissue, whatever, and when my body goes to repair that and provide amino acids, that it uses the amino acids that I've eaten to build bigger muscles, say. And then okay, now that's an anabolic process. So I lost the question. I went on a tangent.
Basically, if we lose hours of sleep, can we catch up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Um, so when being awake is catabolic.
Yeah.
So I'm being so being awake right now, I'm using stored resources and I'm using whatever I eat, but I'm there's a deficit. Like I'm losing, right? So I'm trying to do as much anabolic behavior as I can, but being awake is and being active is catabolic. I'm using up my resources. And at some point tonight, I'll be super tired and I'll need to go to sleep because I've used up all my resources
Yeah.
essentially. And so when I go to sleep, I'm flushing out waste products and I'm repairing damage, and then I'm sort of restocking the shelves, so to speak, of like all the nutrients and enzymes and glycogen stores and all the stuff that all my cells need. Different cells need different things, but I need to restore everything to where my body is at least as good tomorrow as it was today when I started out the day. And so if I stay awake longer than I should, or if I don't sleep as much as I should, I didn't do that completely, right? So take the brain, for example. When we build up waste products in our brain all day. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's why you can watch your heart rate go up while you're working on your computer, and you can feel completely exhausted and fatigued from just studying or reading all day, because that is a high energy demand process, and our brain doesn't have a lot of blood flow relative to other aspects of our body, and so we use the CSF fluid, or the CSF, which is fluid, and when we go to sleep, uh, some certain cells in the brain shrink down and create these little channels for the CSF to be able to flow and get rid of the waste products. Um, if you don't get rid of waste products, well, something that's sort of a waste product that's being built up all day is something called amyloid plaque. Most people know that those are associated with uh, several forms of neurological decline. So as we get older, we know people build up something called tau proteins under certain situations, and amyloid plaques. And amyloid plaques you can think of as just kind of like a scar tissue based on waste products being around too frequently or too long. Um, and so anytime you sleep deprive yourself, you interrupt that process. And you can, if a beta amyloid plaque gets laid down, that's really in response to inflammation. The waste products are causing some inflammation in your brain, and your brain's trying to protect it by laying down this plaque. Um, and when you go catch up and sleep, you don't break down the amyloid plaque. Like it's still there. Now, if you're just sleep depriving yourself, this is probably an infinitesimally small amount of amyloid plaque that we're talking about. It's not like you're getting these huge chunks from staying awake. But when you recurrently do that, right, as a habit, you sleep less than you need, 3 to 4 hours less than you need for say 10 years or 20 years, you build up a lot of those waste products. So there are certain things that you can catch up on. There are certain things that will restore, say something like your hormones. When you don't get enough sleep, the next day your testosterone will be 30% lower, your insulin sensitivity in several tissues will be lower, your growth hormone will be lower, your inflammatory markers will be high, the chemokines and cytokines that cause your cells to move around in your immune system and reparative systems, those will all be off balance. And when you sleep, you can correct all of that. I always give the metaphors like if you broke your leg, um, and you immediately sought medical attention, and they x-rayed it, made sure that everything's perfectly straight, reset it if it needed to, they casted it, gave you the right types of anti-inflammatories that didn't interfere with bone growth, maybe put a bone stimulator on there, made sure your hormones and everything and minerals and everything was there, and you repaired as quickly as possible, versus you broke your leg and decided you're too busy to do anything about it, and you walk around on it for a while, you kind of twist it a few times and re-injure it several times. 5 years from now, if you went to immediate care, but I did an x-ray, I would still be able to tell that you had a broken leg, right? There'd be some scar tissue there,
Yeah.
there'd be some callus formation,
Uh-huh.
but you might not notice it at all. You might say my leg's stronger
Yeah.
than it's ever been, it feels great.
Yeah.
If you were the person that didn't give yourself care and it took you a month to go see the doctor, you probably have a mangled leg. You probably have all sorts of nerve problems and pain problems and blood flow problems. And we don't even need an x-ray to say like you damaged yourself and you're going to pay for that for the rest of your life. Right. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how sleep deprivation is. The faster you get in there and restore it and repair it, the less damage you've done, but you have done some damage. And I don't want to scare people because it we're talking an infinitesimally small amount of damage every day. It's more of a chronic issue. When you chronically sleep deprive yourself, um, you're hormonally different, you're metabolically different, your brain is working different regions of your brain are working harder than other regions of your brain, and so when you chronically do it, there's a lot of irreparable damage. I don't want to scare people too much and make them think that if they lose a little bit of sleep, they've damaged themselves forever. It's an infinitesimally small amount of damage, right? So it's a big chronic issue. If you do it all the time, it's like it's like if you overtrain exercising, right? You've done more damage than you can repair from. And so if you quit overtraining, and you make sure, and you're getting plenty of rest, and you make sure you're metabolically and hormonally ready, you'll recover from that. But did you do a little bit of damage? Probably. Like there's probably something in there, like maybe some scar tissue laid down around a tendon or a
Yeah.
ligament or something that's going to be there, but you probably won't notice it the rest of your life. If you overtrain for 20 or 30 years, we've seen that, right? Like the ultra marathon runners or whatever, they're just addicted to running, and they'll just run and run and run, and they'll just run through 100 injuries, and they're skinny and light and agile enough to like still ambulate around, but they have a lot of musculoskeletal problems. Like they've done a lot of damage. So it's kind of the same way. It's analogous to that.
I think for me, I think I discussed this with you previously. I mentioned it that sleep deprivation to me is the greatest form of torture. When I had my kids, it was like the first 2 years of each child's life was hell. I put on weight. I was miserable. I was just like, I couldn't even function as a human being. Like, I prioritize sleep in a big way. So, I want us to just quickly, if you could touch on insomnia, like sleep disorders like insomnia. What are some of the misconceptions about insomnia and the strategies that people can use to overcome it?
Well, there are lots of forms of insomnia. There's lots, there's a whole profession of sleep medicine now. And I say now, but sleep science is about 70 years old or something around there. And for the first 20 years, we didn't know anything. So it's really about 50 years old. And obviously, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a Western trained physician, so I'm not completely bashing the profession, but but cancels everything I said before, right? But it is a profession that is highly fixated on new diagnoses, right? So continually breaking things down into smaller and smaller categories. I think at this point there's like 86 different sleep disorders now. Um, I don't have those memorized. I don't care. Basically, you're sleeping well or you're not sleeping well. Um, the most common form of insomnia, no matter what your sleep specialist tells you, the most common form of insomnia, um, there's different ways to get there, but uh, the end result is psychophysiologic insomnia, which basically means that you can't sleep because you're worried that you're not going to be able to sleep, right? So your own cognitive processes, your own stress is what's preventing you from sleeping.
Yeah.
And now you're not sleeping, so you're more worried about not sleeping. And then you hear
Yeah.
this podcast and you say, "Oh my God, I'm damaging my brain and I can't sleep." And then you're going to lay in your bed and go, "If I don't get to sleep in the next 36 minutes, I'm not going to get 8 hours of sleep and my brain's going to be." Or, you know, what women do a lot, because women are so externally focused on everybody else, and usually the first time they even think about themselves at all is when they get in bed. So like they get in bed and they're like thinking about themselves, and thinking about their own health and their own well-being and their own future. And oftentimes they use that time to worry about all the things that they've possibly done wrong and screwed up their
Yeah.
life or screwed up their kids' life or whatever. um, and there's no critique on women. This is just my observation as a clinician. This is what I've seen. And they'll lay in bed and worry about every single mistake that they've possibly made during that day, um, or everything that could happen in the future, whatever. And it's really hard to go to sleep when you have stress hormones. I mean, that's one of the primary factors of being able to go to sleep is your stress hormones coming down. If you went to sleep in a cold, dark cave where it was completely insulated from sound or whatever, and there was nothing to wake you up, you would still wake up, right? You don't need the sun to wake you up. You don't need noise to wake you up. You don't need light. You don't need temperature change even. Temperature change will wake you up. Sound will wake you up. Light will wake you up. But if you just laid in a constant temperature, say 68-degree room, and it was cold and dark and nothing interrupted you, you'd still wake up. Well, why would
Yeah.
you wake up? You would wake up because your stress hormones. When you're asleep, uh, especially during deep sleep, and especially during the first couple of sleep cycles, your stress hormones are the lowest they will ever be, and during any 24-hour period. And the reason for that is because stress hormones are catabolic, and of course, anabolic hormones are anabolic.
Yeah.
So we want to invert those. So when you're in fight or flight, you have maximum stress hormones, and no anabolic hormones are being produced. Like you'll still have some around, but you're 100% catabolic, because all that matters is getting away from the stressor. So your body's willing to use every resource it has, including whatever, chewing off your own arm or whatever it takes. Like,
Yeah.
like whatever it takes, we got to get out of this situation. So we're going to use all of our resources right now. Anabolics exactly the opposite. We're in a comfortable, safe place. We're recuperating. We don't need any stress hormones. So we're maximally anabolic. So when when you go to sleep, your stress hormones need to be lower than the level of stress hormones that wake you up. But if you don't get enough sleep, so let's say it takes 8 hours, and this is approximation. Uh, it takes 8 hours to recover from being awake for 16 hours. If I only sleep 6 hours, tomorrow still comes. I still have to do everything tomorrow that I was going to do if I slept 8 hours, but I have 25% fewer resources. So
Yeah.
how do I compensate? How does my body do it? Right? If I don't have the resources I need, it's like not having enough money in the bank. What do? You take a loan. And the body's form of loan is stress hormones. So you use
Yeah.
more stress hormones, and those are catabolic. So you're going to use your body as a fuel source during that day to do something that you ordinarily could have used your stored fuels and stored resources for. And so the more frequently you do that, the higher your stress hormones are. And then, of course, when you're stressed, your prefrontal cortex doesn't work as well. You perceive everything more negative. And so you're going to actually feel more stressed. You're going to feel more anxiety. You're going to generate more stress hormones because you're tired, because you're sleep deprived. And now you have high stress hormones to compensate for sleep deprivation. Now you have higher stress hormones because your brain's not working all that well. and you live in this busy society we have with all these stupid gadgets and computers that don't work for 45 minutes trying to get onto a podcast and all that kind of stuff. And so those things are creeping your stress hormones up and up and up. And now you go to bed and you're like, I'm going to bed because it's time to go to bed,
Yeah.
but I'm not physiologically ready to go to bed. And so
Yeah.
I lay in
Yeah.
bed and my stress hormones are too high to let me go to sleep. So what do? It's not like a switch. There's no knob. I can't turn them down. So that's when things like mindfulness come into play.
Mhm.
I have a 4-page kind of um, workbook or guide that like teaches people proper sleep hygiene and sort of cognitive behavioral therapy around sleeping. And basically, what you need to do is not worry about all the stuff you're worried about. You're still going to have the stress hormones,
Yeah.
right? Whatever
Oh,
built up. I can't do anything about that. But we can prevent you from making more, or we can reduce how much you're going to make, say, which will allow you to fall asleep faster. And then we can make progressive changes, so a little bit better every day. Over the course of maybe 30 days, 45 days, you can get to where you can just sleep great. And a really, really, really short, uh, almost irresponsible summary of it is there's an alarm. You set an alarm clock to get ready for bed, and then you set an alarm clock to wake up, whether you think you need one or not, because that's one thing you could possibly worry about.
yeah.
Take all the worry out. So an hour before bed, you set an alarm clock goes off, and that alarm clock is just as important as the alarm clock that wakes you up. And there's a 9 hour window in between those two alarm clocks. So 1 hour before bed, you're getting ready for bed for an hour. You're going to bed, and you aren't doing anything else until that morning alarm clock goes off. Now, there's a whole bunch of strategies in there about how to prevent you from worrying while you're in bed. And this is counterculture advice. Most sleep scientists and researchers and all this, not people who treat people for sleep all the time, but you read the PubMed, whatever, they're going to tell you get out of bed and go read for a while, or go do some light stretching or meditation, or have a cup of tea or whatever. It's like, nope. Lay in bed and train your body to be in bed without stress. And so you can do that with breath work. You can do it with progressive muscle relaxation. You can do that with guided meditation. You can do your own meditation, whatever. There's all sorts of things to do. But basically, the alarm clock to get ready goes off. You do everything you can to be ready to go to bed. You get into bed, and you don't look at the clock. You don't turn the lights on. You don't get up and do anything. If you need to go to the bathroom, you get up, you go to the bathroom, you come back, you lay in bed, you relax, calmly relax. You work on decreasing your stress hormones. You have lists that you've written down so that you know everything. You don't need to think about anything. The most prepared you'll ever be at handling the problems in your life will be after you get a good night's sleep. So you don't handle those until you wake up in the morning. And you're wasting time by trying to fiddle with them while you're asleep. You're impairing your ability to work with them tomorrow. So that's the really short version of it. Um, there's some progressive steps and some kind of psychological concepts to get your brain around. That's why it takes 4 to 6 weeks to kind of master. Uh, but of all the stuff that I do with like all the different modalities I use and all the hormones and peptides and nutritional advice and exercise advice and meditation advice, whatever, like all the things I work with my clients, that stupid little 4-page worksheet is like by far the most powerful thing I have. And it makes a huge difference for everybody. And so long answer, most people's insomnia is caused by stress. Men build up more adenosine than women because men have more muscle mass and roughly the same size brain. So adenosine causes sleep pressure, and so men can usually fall asleep even when they're stressed. They have so much sleep pressure they'll fall asleep. But then after one sleep cycle, once they've cleared out some waste products from their brain, they wake back up and then they can't go back to sleep. Women usually can't fall asleep, and then once they fall asleep, they can usually stay asleep. And that's I'd say that's 95%. It's very rare to have a true sleep disorder. It's very rare. And you know, sleep physicians would hate me for saying that, but it's a very rare thing. Even the things they diagnose, most of the time, I change people's behavior around sleep, and their sleep disorder goes away. So it's almost all psychological.
That's great to hear. And you have very kindly given our audience access to the Stressless Sleep Guide.
Yes.
So they can check out exactly what you're talking about. My last question before we end is I know so many people personally who take supplements or medication to help them sleep and stay asleep. Can we just talk a little bit about that? Because I know you also have sleep remedy.
Right. Well, um, so there's something called a supplement, which by definition is supposed to be nutritionally supplemental to your food.
Got it.
Ideally, we would get 100% of our nutrition from our food.
Yeah.
That's not reality, right? So I
Yeah.
always tell my clients there's an ideal way. Like there's so many things we can measure now. We can say, well, here's the ideal way to live your life. But here's reality, right? This is
Yeah.
what you can actually do because there's limitations in that. You got to get your kids to school, you have a job, you have adult responsibilities, and whatever, life gets in the way. And so in between there is where we supplement. And that could be nutritional supplements, that could be gadgets that train us how to meditate, that can be, whatever. There's all
Yeah.
sorts of little what people call biohacks that fit into that little supplement area. So uh, if you're truly um, addressing a nutritional deficit with a nutritional supplement, then I believe in supplementation. Um, but you can also use supplements the way pharma uses drugs, and the difference between a drug and pharmaceutical drug and a supplement is that nutritional supplement, it's putting stuff in your body that's already in your body, and there should be more of it. Or you think there might be some more of it, and if you're wrong, you just have expensive urine. Big deal, right? It's just going to be flushed
Right.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but what the pharmaceutical company does, so say like a sleep drug, one of the things that happens as our brains are getting us ready to sleep is the large increase of a neuropeptide called GABA,
Yeah.
GABA, which stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. And what that does is it slows down the neocortex. It basically makes makes it harder to fire every neuron in your brain. And one of the primary components of being asleep is that you're not interacting with your environment, right? By definition, if I'm interacting with my environment, I'm not asleep. So I have to be ignoring my environment. All my senses still work. I can still see, smell, taste, and hear, and all that. But my brain's not paying attention to it. And so that's sort of the primary concept about being asleep. So GABA is the primary neuropeptide that's doing that. And that gets secreted well after melatonin. Melatonin initiates the cascades, and lots of neurotransmitters and neuropeptides start changing around. And GABA is one of the big actors that's going to go in there and slow down the neocortex and prevent you from paying attention to your environment. Other hormones are going to lower your body temperature and things like that, lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure. All these things are going to shift. Um, but the pharmaceutical industry said, well, if GABA slows down your brain, what if we made a super GABA, right? We made a molecule that's more GABA than GABA, right? So it has 10 times the effect of GABA. And that would be like benzodiazepines, like Valium or Xanax or something.
Mm.
But the Z drugs, they're like, oh, even smarter. We can make this super duper GABA that's more GABA than GABA, and it's 100 times more powerful than GABA. So it binds these GABA receptors, and it causes 100 times that effect, which just really shuts down your neocortex, and you quit paying attention to your environment. However, you can be completely alert appearing, you can be having conversations with people, you can be driving your car, you can be doing all kinds of stuff, but your brain is not registering what's going around. Um, I've done this with plenty of people who are under the influence of a sleep drug, had a 30-minute conversation with them. The next day, they have zero recollection that that conversation happened, because what
Wow.
it's doing is just dissociating your neocortex from your brainstem and midbrain, your lizard brain, as they call it. So it's just dissociating those two. And the pharmaceutical companies that produce these Z drugs actually were successfully sued for this because they knew this and during their
Right.
research. And so people were taking these drugs and getting in their cars and driving to casinos and gambling away their life savings and coming home and going back to sleep, getting back in bed, waking up in the morning, not having any recollection that
Mhm.
they even left their house, and then finding out somebody must have stolen my life savings or something, and then they find out, oh no, actually that was you. Or they went and picked up prostitutes, or they went and like gorged themselves on all the junk food in their house or whatever, because you go to primal, the four
Yeah.
F's, uh,
Yeah.
you go to the primal behaviors that are dictated by your midbrain that are just for survival. You know, um, so uh, when you take sleep drugs, you're doing a pharmacological trick. You're trying to do something outside of natural, um, outside of your natural brain, your brain's natural behavior. So I'm not a big fan of sleep
Yeah.
drugs, and they interfere with what we call the sleep architecture. So without getting into it, if you've ever done a sleep study and you have all the electrodes all over you and the straps and all this, when you combine all that, it's something that's called a histogram, and we can plot it on a graph, and it's very clear. It's like you're in stage one for this long, you drop down into stage two, you're there for that long, you went down to stages three and four, you traveled across time, you came out from four to three, back through two, and then you went up into a REM cycle, and you did a few minutes of REM, and then you came back down, and that was one sleep cycle, and we can chart this. Well, sleep drugs interfere with REM sleep by about 80%. So you'll lose about 80% of your REM sleep by taking a sleep drug. You'll lose about 20% of your deep sleep. Alcohol does the opposite. And a lot of people take sleep
Oh,
drugs after drinking a couple of glasses of wine, or
yeah.
they take it with a couple of cocktails even. And then they go to sleep and they lose 80% of deep sleep because of alcohol, 20% of deep sleep because of the Ambien. And then the same with REM sleep. And you do a sleep study on them, and their sleep study says 99.9% stage two sleep. So they never got into REM, they never got into deep. Now, how these people survive, I don't know, because for what we know about sleep science is they should be dead. They shouldn't be able to survive this. So
Oh,
there's
wow.
something going on that we can't measure, but it's super detrimental, right? It's super detrimental. Um, and and you can see it in them, right? You see people who drink and use sleep drugs and um, don't get enough sleep, and you see it, right? They age way faster. Like, you can
Yeah.
tell they don't look healthy. Their performance drops off really quickly. We've seen it with presidents, right? They go into this super stressful job. They don't get a lot of sleep. They look relatively young. 4 years later, they look like they've aged 15 years. That, that's the same thing that's happening when you aren't getting good sleep. There's uh, there's a bunch of terrible data around the sleep drugs. They don't actually, they on average you only sleep an extra 37 minutes, but all the sleep architecture is gone, so you don't notice that. Like, it's like you got way less sleep, even though you were technically unconscious for 37 minutes more.
Unconscious.
You
Yeah.
weren't getting, so sleep drugs really make you unconscious, and
Yeah.
alcohol helps you become unconscious, but it's not really sleep. So you aren't getting the benefits of the sleep. So you'd be way better off with just having insomnia. Like, honestly, if you had insomnia so bad that you were only sleeping, say, 2 hours a night, you're healthier than if you took Ambien and slept what you thought was 6 or 8 hours a night, because you just aren't really getting any sleep. And in fact, people who chronically take sleep drugs, they die on average 12 to 14 years earlier than their peers who don't have chronic insomnia or don't use sleep drugs chronically. Same thing with shift workers, people
Yeah.
who work like, the night shift for, decades. They die 12 to 14 years earlier because, what I was saying without actually saying it is, when I go to sleep, I'm repairing from today and preparing for tomorrow. So if I could repair 100% and then restore and prepare 100%, I would wake up exactly the same every day. I wouldn't age, right? And I would forever be however old I am right now, right? But we can't, like, when we're young, we actually recover more, right? So that's why young
Yeah.
people wake up
Yeah.
smarter and taller and
Yeah.
stronger.
Yeah.
And then that plateaus for about a decade, and then it kind of starts going downhill. And then the older you get, the faster that decline is happening, which is why I'm so adamant about, staying fit, exercising, keeping your hormones in order, nutrition, and, like, doing everything you can to stave that off. And then sleeping really well, because the more you can sleep, the slower you're going to age. And the slower you age, like, your physiological age is dictating how long you're going to be on the planet, right? So
Yeah.
you can be 64 years old, but physiologically 88 years old. And so when you die at 64, it's actually pretty, you probably had like, it's a pretty good run. You
Yeah.
kind of ran like the human life expectancy curve is, somewhere in the high 80s, early 90s. Like, there's exceptions
Yeah.
and outliers, but yeah, like a physiologic age of around 90 is that's, you should pretty much plan on being dead by then.
Yeah.
And so that's my answer to sleep drugs. Like
I love
my
that.
sleep supplement is what I told you. It's like 100% nutritional supplement. It's stuff
Nice.
that
I checked it out.
you would ordinarily get from your food.
Yeah.
And we've determined that these things are frequently deficient in people and they interfere
Yeah.
with sleep. And so all that's in there are the nutrients that your brain and body need for sleep. And if you're deficient on them, your body will use them. If you're not
Yeah.
deficient on them, you'll pee them out. And
Perfect.
that's it.
That's
And if you
great.
take it and it makes you sleep better, you were deficient. Like that's it.
Perfect.
And if you take them and it doesn't make you sleep better, you weren't deficient. It's that easy.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Parsley, for joining us today. Thank you for giving us your stress to sleep guide as well. This has been a phenomenal conversation and it's covered so much in a short space of time. So we really appreciate you being here and everything that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.